Cloud. Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel York. I'm the Director of IT Data Transparency here within GSA's Office of Government-Wide Policy. That's my normal job. In my other duties as assigned, other chose duties, I'm also the government co-chair of the ACT-IAC ITMM COI. I wanted to thank you all for being able to attend our September meeting. We have an action-packed meeting, some great speakers to tell you about. Just as a scheduling note, we are recording this session. So if you don't want your face recorded or your voice recorded, the mute and video buttons are right there for your clicking pleasure. Here we go. So I'll pass it off.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for participating in today's session. My name is Varsha Maheshwari, and I am the Programs Chair for the IT Modernization and Management COI. We hope today's discussion and the information our speakers provide today is a valuable resource for you all. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Our guest speakers will go over an overview slide deck. So I request all session participants to keep yourself muted during the presentation, but please feel free to come off mute or use the chat feature if you have any questions for our speakers. We will also open the floor at the end after the presentation, so feel free to come off mute at that time and participate. And just overall, you know, we would want to make this session an interactive experience for all. And Dan already mentioned a couple of people just joined in, so I want to reiterate that today's session is being recorded and will be available post-event. So if you miss any important notes, you will be able to get to that afterwards as well. All right, so we're very excited for today's conversation, and we appreciate you all being here. We look forward to learning from our guest speakers, Beth and Andrea, about the grants QSMO and their vision around how they see technology helping them achieve their goals. Beth Foley is the lead for customer engagement, and Andrea Sampanis is the lead for solutions and services. During this meeting, we are going to learn about the impact of grants, some background and goals of grants QSMO, and we will hopefully close out with anything this group should know about in regard to how to get more involved around QSMO. And we would like to keep this as, again, more of a conversation. So please feel free to interject and ask questions at any point. And I'm thinking if I missed anything, but without much further ado, over to you, Beth and Andrea.
Thank you so much, Varsha and Daniel, and thank you all so much for the invitation to be here today. I'm Beth Foley. As you heard, I'm the Customer Engagement Lead with the Grants Quality Service Management Office, or Grants QSMO. You'll hear from Andrea Sampanis, my amazing colleague here. In just a little bit, we're going to divide and conquer. I'm going to start out, we can go to the next slide. I'm going to start out by kind of framing the background of the Grants QSMO effort and talking to some of the realities about the grants community, the demands on the community, and the realities and challenges, and in some cases, shortcomings of our IT ecosystem to date. And then I'll talk about some of the work that we have been doing and the accomplishments some of the work that the Grants QSMO has led, and then some exciting movement towards progress across the government-wide space. And then Andrea will talk about our marketplace and the great work that the Grants QSMO is doing to expand that. And that is probably where you're going to be most excited. If you aren't already aware of our Grants QSMO marketplace, that part of it is going to be should be hopefully of interest to you all. So speaking to the realities of our grants ecosystem today, as you see on here on the left side, a big part of when we stood up our Grants QSMO, we first were formed in 2019. So we've been around for many years, officially got our designation in 2021, but a big part of it was trying to understand who our customer base is and what groups comprise that. So obviously we've got all the federal awarding agencies, we've got the federal shared service providers, we have industry, And within all of that, at the recipient level, particularly state and local tribal governments, colleges and universities, nonprofits, science, research community, et cetera. More numerically, looking at the data that you can find on usaspending.gov, it's over $5 trillion in federal funds that goes out the door related to grants and cooperative agreements. That translates to over 130,000 unique recipient organizations. Those are the people who have applied for a grant and have received a grant. Over 4 million grant transactions. I think one of the most exciting points on here in terms of what the Grants QSMO has done to try to understand who all of our stakeholders are is learning that there are far more grant-making agencies, federal grant-making agencies than people thought, certainly than I thought when I first started doing this work. People tend to think that, well, there's 24 CFO Act agencies, and we know there's smaller agencies. There are 51 current federal grant-making agencies. There's another one in the pipeline that is authorized, it just doesn't have appropriations yet. So at some point there should be 52, but there's at least 51 that we are aware of and that we actively reach out to have a conversation, to understand what their current portfolios are, needs, challenges, objectives, where they're looking to invest, where they have invested, and how things are going. We can go to the next slide. So speaking about the money that has been going out the door and looking at USA spending data, this is where this information is being pulled from. You can see the general trend here, both linearly and just more accurately for the obligations related to grants. Unsurprising, big spike related to all the pandemic funding, and I'm sure that will continue to grow with the additional funds that have come out with other legislation and other appropriations, particularly around infrastructure and others. Another interesting thing that we see when we're looking at this data more granularly is an awareness that the number of transactions, so an individual award can have unlimited number of transactions, the number of transactions is also growing. And that's an interesting trend because for that, it helps us understand the demands on the workforce. And I don't think I have a particular answer as to why that is the case, but it's important awareness for everybody. Just being cognizant of the fact that the grants workforce in this case, at the federal level, which is what this is reflecting, is doing even more work per award. So that'll be something that we continue to try to better understand, and we certainly discuss with individual agencies to understand how things are going and where their needs are. Next slide, please. The next one will speak to government-wide grants IT spending. So this, if you're not familiar with it-dashboard.gov, that is the source of this data. If you are familiar with it, you might be familiar with the limitations of it, how it is not perfect. It is not a complete picture. Our office, certainly, we have great big goals of trying to understand what is the cost of doing the business of grants management in the federal government today. And that would include everything on the IT side as well as the grants workforce side and all the supporting contracts and all of that. This is not a complete picture and it is an always moving target, but this is what we have available, and this is certainly public. This piece of this information is available on it-dashboard.gov, which is public facing. We supplement this information as we go when we talk to all of the agencies. Again, we meet with them one-on-one and we're trying to understand where they have recently invested, where they're considering making investments, what's in the pipeline, what part of the grants life cycle are they looking to make an investment in. But I think the key takeaways for us here are what it says in the snapshot, that although it is exciting to see that there is growth in the investment, if you know anything about the federal government budgeting process, you know that it is set up to be a significant lag and does not support agile, really IT planning. And that is unfortunate, but it is the reality. There are very limited opportunities for agencies to be able to be that nimble. But I think it is as we have engaged at the federal level, all of these agencies, we've stood up a Grants QSMO steering committee of really experienced executives who have been in the government for a long time, several of whom have been directly involved in the ownership and management of federal shared service providers, they also have helped us understand that the grants IT community has chronically underfunded the IT ecosystem. So it's not just about putting more into the pipeline, more money into the grants IT pipeline, but how can we do this in a more strategic and intentional and coordinated manner that also helps prevent unnecessary or duplicative investments. So that's a big part of our role and the work we've been doing over the last few years, and we'll continue to build on that. Next slide. A little bit of the history of the QSMO construct and concept. There are 4 quality service management offices. We were created under an OMB memo in the last administration, M1916. So HHS, obviously, we got it for grants management. Treasury has it for financial management. Homeland Security has it for cybersecurity, and there's one for HR that started out at GSA and is now over at the Office of Personnel Management. All 4 QSMOs have a similar mission in terms of we are all required to do these types of investment reviews and coordination within our respective functional areas or lines of business for coordinated strategic investments. But we're all each required to establish a marketplace of quality, innovative, shared solutions and services. And so Andrea will talk about that in more detail in her segment. And then we got our formal designation, like I mentioned, in 2021. Basically, we've been doing the work since 2019. We jumped through the hoops that OMB needed us to do to basically explain what our plan was out for the next 10 years or so. And then we got that approved, and that's how we got our formal status. But we have been very busy for over 4 years. So in that first slide where I talked about the complex types of stakeholders and customers that we, the Grants QSMO, interact with and view ourselves as serving, and that there's so many programs and different recipient types within the IT ecosystem itself. It is very old. It is very old. Not everywhere, but I think the general trend and the general or if you were to make a generalization, it is old, it is fragmented, and it is complex, and it is not well integrated because for a variety of reasons, some of which we are personally working to try to improve. And in other cases, there are other initiatives afoot government-wide that are going to help address a lot of these challenges. But the big piece that we push for is interoperability. Again, reducing duplicative investments. Where can we avoid reinventing the wheel? Where can work that one agency has done be leveraged by another agency, even if it is just a shared performance work statement? Any of that can help streamline the process in support of making an investment in grants technology. Our marketplace, though, offers currently federal shared service providers that have gone through an extensive validation process. Again, you'll hear more about that from Andrea. And then there's expansion underway for that. Ultimately, though, in support of offering these services to empower the grant-making agencies and their applicants and recipients to efficiently and effectively deliver on their grants mission. That is our mission, and that is our vision. That's what we work towards every day. Next slide. And under that mission, we have kind of 3 fundamental pillars. And some of this could look familiar because it's some buzz language that has been around for multiple administrations, multiple presidential management agendas, but easing burden. And when we say ease burden, we don't just mean for recipients and applicants. We also mean at the federal agency level, because there are ways that we as a government can also make our lives easier. And we're trying to identify those and put those practices in place, drive efficiencies, be responsive to customer needs. We pride ourselves at the Grants QSMO team being really transparent and customer focused. That is, we keep that as like our central core principle. And then leveraging data as a strategic asset. So how can we unlock and make use of the data that is already being gathered, collected by the public, the people who apply for and receive grants, that agencies themselves gather and have within our own systems? How can we make better use of all of that? A note about who we are not. I've talked about the work that we do. We are not OMB. We are not the policy arm for grants. That is still squarely over at OMB in the Office of Federal Financial Management. We are not also the grant standards lead, although that person has been hired and is within the walls of HHS within the Office of Grants, but it is an adjacent function to the Grants QSMO role. The Grants QSMO works to drive the adoption of the standards, and we do that through the partnership with the federal shared service providers, agencies going through IT modernization initiatives, and then working with vendors and the agencies who are making awards to those vendors. Also, we, the Grants QSMO, we don't own or operate any of these shared services. We partner with them. Again, we bring them onto our marketplace. We help communicate what they can provide. We advise agencies on what's available to them when they identify a grants IT need, and then we advise them accordingly. Next slide. So work that Grants QSMO has been busy doing and what we've accomplished. We've launched our marketplace, launched that within the last year. I think it was last September. And that is not static. It is always going to continue evolving, and you'll hear more about the evolution of that is underway. We have executed some really great market research to help drive the expansion of that marketplace. We've done a ton of work to build relationships and partnerships with as many of the stakeholders that I mentioned before, including you all. Also talked to recipients through Federal Demonstration Partnership and with industry and recipients and agencies at National Grants Management Association. But I think a lot of the one-on-one conversations that we have with those 51 federal agencies, or at least the ones that respond to our emails and have a person who is available to talk to us, we have done a great amount of work building and sharing, building a network and sharing information across that network. We have launched an IT demand survey to understand the needs and plans of those agencies in terms of grants IT investments. And we have been piloting the use of customer experience and customer satisfaction tools to drive improvements, particularly with our federal shared service providers. And we'll go to the next slide, and then I will hand it off to Andrea. And when I mentioned some of the work that is happening government-wide that is outside of the Grants QSMO scope, but that we certainly have a stake in, is the development of a CXO body, a governance body for the grants community. Mike Peckham, I know you're on here. I know this is meaningful to you as well as so many of us, that there has been a chronic and impactful lack of governance within the grants community. Historically, grants has been kind of a subordinate topic under the CFO community, which made sense statutorily, but it has the impacts of that have meant that there hasn't been a voice or parity with the other CXO bodies. And when I talked about the fragmented ecosystem, IT ecosystem, and its aging and lacks coordination and oversight, that's an example. That's a symptom of that lack of governance. So this, there was an OMB memo that just was released last month, creates the Council of Federal Financial Assistance, COFFA. No, it is not the COFAR, which was a previously existing temporary body. This is the COFFA. It stands up a role at the CFO Act agencies called the SFAO, Senior Financial Assistance Officer. So agencies are in the process of notifying OMB who their SFAO person is, basically their senior grants official. Financial assistance is the umbrella term for that. Grants QSMO is called out, as well as other functions within the community, and we're called out in that memo, and we are currently working with OMB and HHS, who will be first co-chair with OMB for this COFFA. We're working with them to kind of figure out how these existing functions and government-wide initiatives and existing work groups will tie in and be fully coordinated. But it's really exciting. It's going to help so much. It's been needed for so long. And yeah, I think that's the big piece I wanted to convey. And I will turn it over to you, Andrea, to talk about the marketplace.
Thank you. I do see we have one question in the chat. It's just about if we can get a copy of the slides. QSMO is happy to share these slides. I think, Dan York, you have them. I don't know, Varsha, if you send them to the attendees, but we're fine with them being shared. And I do just, as we're talking, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I try to always watch that because I think it's important for me to answer your questions when they come up. All right, so Grants QSMO Marketplace. This is a view of our federal marketplace. It includes, a federal meaning federal shared service providers. It includes both mandatory providers, which it's not shown in the screenshot, but at the bottom underneath this part, it has the mandatory providers such as SAM.gov, grants.gov, the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, which will be going live very soon, over to GSA. It's modernizing and moving to GSA. But also a big part of what we did in our very first year was to say, hey, who's actually open for business? Who wants to be a federal provider? There was a lot of myth busting we actually had to do, and we still get it from the recipients of, why did you get this person and not this person? Well, that other government agency didn't want to be a shared service provider for external users. So they have to be open. So the first rule is you have to be open to external customers. First up, you can't really see, but high level, who's on it for us? NIH, ERA, and Grant Solutions sort of sit squarely in that award management space. ERA, very exciting, will be going live, migrating over Department of Commerce. So that is a huge migration we're really proud of. I know the team is working very hard. Everyone cross your fingers, it goes well. Grant Solutions is another award management system. They have a lot of major departments, right? Department of Labor went live last year, Interior, SSA, SBA. So these are major users of shared services. You can't really say that many CFO Act are using other people's shared services in total. For the other, you can for payroll for sure, but for the other QSMOs. So we are really proud. We have a good use of our federal shared service providers. In the payment side, we've got Treasury ASAP, which is free, as well as payment management service at PSC HHS. Really strong usage there. Almost, I'd say, large amounts of our volume of grants payments are going through those two systems. And then our last sort of area of federal providers is DOI, Interior's indirect cost benefit analysis, as well as PSC also has a service provider there. PSC is continuing to work on their services to external customers right now. So we really, we're at the Grants QSMO, we're always trying to balance supply and demand, make sure we have enough supply for the demand that's coming. So we were super excited when we could bring on Department of Interior, because when it launched, they weren't part of it, and we brought them on sort of halfway through last year. So that's an example of we're constantly iterating. And, if any of you are out there and you are a federal, you own a system, a grants award management system or ancillary service, and you're interested in being part of our marketplace, we'd love to talk to you. There's a process you have to follow to get on. But I think if you talk to DOI, it wasn't horribly painful, and we're always looking to expand that. But I will say that we currently can't meet the demand with just these federal providers, at least not in the award management space. So we quickly realized that. And so we went to say, hey, how can we expand our marketplace to include our critical commercial partners? Next slide, Dan. So what we did in trying to expand, we wanted to first make sure we set out what are our objectives. When it comes to the commercial marketplace, what are we really trying to focus on? One, we focus on, are you meeting the standards? The FIBF, it's not, I think sometimes people think of the FIBF just as these standard data elements. That's only one piece of the process. It's the taxonomy that we all use. It's the use cases, the user stories. It's the business capabilities that tell you our business needs as a federal government, which is based on 2 CFR 200. And yes, the Data Act is included in those requirements. But that's really important because it is a ton of work to bring our community together. So one, do you meet the FIBF needs? Two, we are not here to force a one-size-fits-all approach. That's, I think, a misconception. We've worked really hard to try to talk to our 51 awarding agencies. We're not going to always force you to something that's on our federal marketplace. And we're also not going to force you. We're not actually going after one end-to-end system, one platform that connects, every single thing together. We can't because it's just too big. Quite frankly, we've tried it twice and we failed. So we're not going to keep making those same mistakes. We have SAM.gov, we have grants.gov, we have the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. Those are here to stay. You're not going to replace those if you're a vendor, right? You got to connect to those and make it a better experience for your users. We will leverage standards to make sure the data flows through them, and we can really hopefully improve that one day. But again, we're not forcing one size fits all. We are trying to make sure whatever strategy we take on the commercial market research side, that we provide a quick path to acquire, because we're doing this because we have a demand and we have a demand now. So we've got to be able to cut time out for those buying agencies. We definitely want to get them the credit they deserve for using best-in-class contracts. It's really hard to be a QSMO because you've got to convince the grant award manager to talk to us. You got to convince the contracting officer to use our acquisition strategy. You got to convince the CIO that, these options meet the requirements they may have. And you also have to make sure you've got a flexible marketplace that can meet all their different needs. So there's a lot of people, and then you've got just all the executives too, to keep them all happy. So it's really tricky. But we think things like leveraging best-in-class contracts, that helps the CO. It helps sell it to them. Also, we definitely need to balance our ability to say with confidence, hey, we think this is a good solution. So QSMO due diligence with the burden we put on the vendors. If we make it so hard to, get on our marketplace, that's in quotes, that it's just not worth it for you to apply, well, that's not good, right? We don't want to, we're trying to just balance. Yes, there's a stamp of approval, but we're not kicking anyone out because we make it so hard to get on. I thought I saw someone's hand raised, but then it went down. So if you do have a question, please put it in the chat and I will follow it or check up on it. All right, next slide. So what we did, as I mentioned, we wanted to expand. Therefore, we have started to run on an annual basis a QSMO RFI. We knew we needed this, and we tested it last year. We did an RFI. We sat there, watched all the demos, read probably some of your responses. We met with vendors, and we narrowed it down to a catalog of market research. We then, and again, this was last year, we piloted with 2 customers, AmeriCorps and Inter-American Fund. They used our catalog to go out with their procurement. There's a part of the FAR called 8.405, where if you have a select vendor pool, you can go out to them. You can accept all vendors even on top of that, but that allows you to say, hey, I think I'm going to get really solid responses that are going to meet my needs from these. So we piloted that, again, very successful. Let's see, Inter-American Fund will be going live in this month with REI's Gov Grants, which was on our solution list, and AmeriCorps awarded to Ernst & Young Grants Accelerator, and they are working to go live later in FY24. So we presented this to our steering committee and said, hey, we already have users of our marketplace. So it's not broken, right? Don't change it. We also obviously worked with GSA and OMB to make sure they agreed with our approach. So we did it again this year. The one thing we changed, we added an industry day to make sure everyone really understood what we were looking for, because we wanted those responses to be really solid. We got great responses. We did a review team. Again, our review team is a government-wide review team. We had representation, almost 20 folks from different types of agencies, 10 CFO Act, 3 smalls. We watched all those. I will tell you, it was thousands of pages, as well as 25 hours of demo videos. And then we narrowed that down to say, who do we want to talk to? Because we quickly realized the demand right now is in award management systems, and we need them now, right? Not we're going to build this in the future, but some of our review team members were needing to procure something very quickly. So they said, we sort of looked at who's got existing ones that meet the standards, that have existing interfaces that could actually demo the system to us. We talked to those vendors, And then we have cataloged all of that research, and we're ready the end of this month to publish it on our Acquisition Gateway site. Next slide. So that's going to be, right now, our plan is that's going to be an annual, and yes, we can review those slides or share those slides. This will be an annual process from our goals right now, is that we'll do this, right? It will go out in March, April timeframe. We'll always have a government-wide review team. Our goal is to always read what you write, but also meet with vendors. I can't meet with everyone. Just so you know, you are seeing 2/3 of the entire QSMO team. Actually, I'd say more than 2/3, because our executive leader, Chad, got a few more duties put on his plate. So you're seeing it's Mary Beth and I. And so we'd love to be able to meet with all of you. Many of you do request, and we will give you time. It's just in that narrow window of sort of that quarter that we're trying to finish the market research, we have to limit it. So we got 60 responses. We ask a lot of questions. Thank you so much to those vendors out there that did respond. We ask word questions for sort of capability statements, as well as feedback for industry best practices that really impacts our strategies, as well as we give the opportunity for our community to leverage our RFI to gather vendor feedback. Not this year, but last year, we had a lot of questions on the standards. The standards lead asked questions around feedback on standards. We worked this year with the subcommittee from the FACE around diversity and inclusion, and they provided questions. We provided those, gather it, and we provide it back. That also, just that right there, saves them time from doing their own RFI, right? I can ask 1 or 2 questions and do the work for them. Very importantly, we ask for an Excel file that asks you to give us a demo link of doing the use cases that are from the FIBF. We asked a lot of feedback on the standards, the standard data elements this time. We ask a lot of details of your solution, and you're going to see that in the next slide of how that's really used. And again, we also ask, hey, how can the government do a better job writing our contracts so that when you go to bid, there's not confusion? Because usually, I was in the private sector for 10 years, when there's confusion, you up the price just a little bit to account for the risk that you don't really know exactly what these people want. I want to take that out. I want to make it easy for you to reply, and hopefully that you will respond, and make it easy for you to bid, because we've actually given you really direct guidance. All right, so the result of that, sort of all of our market research, we take that, we catalog it. Like I said, we reviewed everything you all sent us, met with 14 different vendors, and now we're sort of shrinking that down into a list of prioritized award management systems, so that, again, other customers will come and ask for other services, and we have all of that catalog too, so we can give them that. And we can even tell them, hey, you need professional support services. Here's how you could do it. Here's the RFQ that people have already used. You know, we have all of that. But I will say 9 times out of 10, what people are coming to us with questions about, it's the award management systems. So sort of the competitor to ERA and grant solutions. Oftentimes we find small agencies are the ones that are really coming. They're not, it's either capacity issues or cost issues. The small agencies, they need to move quick, and they don't have a lot of money to spend. And also they almost never have a CIO. So we need to provide them with options that meets all those needs. So the next slide, I'm going to tell you how we help those agencies that are buying. First, we narrowed it down to a list of 7 vendors that are in this catalog of market research with really a lot of detail. Let me tell you how we narrowed that down. It's not on the slide, but I'll just share it. 1, we're looking for, you actually have a system, it's existing, so you could demo it to us and show us the use cases that are in the FIBF. You could answer how it aligns to the different life cycle phases of the grants process, again, according to the FIBF. We are looking for offerings that are on low code, highly configurable platforms. The reason why we want that is because we need a lot of these buying organizations need to be pretty adaptive and change to the needs, as well as 2 CFR 200. If you don't know, there's a update coming out. So all of that could change things, right? And having really old custom, you have to pay someone to come in and reconfigure the code. That is costly and it's not fast enough. Also, we have examples of where our agencies have been able to use highly configurable solutions whenever they did maybe custom, they brought their solution and the user story was, oh my goodness, we need to change this specifically for this one area of our population. Maybe it's an indigenous people that were not very trusting of the government. So for that view, they just needed to tweak it a little bit so that we could be more likely to get people to apply and to submit their performance reports. We need highly configurable solutions to allow us to do that. Most importantly, though, we need to implement very, very quickly. And that's what we have found the configurable solutions do for us. But I don't mean just buy, I'm not going to say a vendor X, that's, platform X, and just hire anyone you want to configure it for you. No, we were looking for already configured, pre-configured grants software. Yes, built on a platform, but it's already set up. It already knows how to talk to sam.gov and to grants.gov. It already uses login.gov if you need IAL1 to log in. Right, it already knows. I'm not going to be talking to an integrator who has no idea what the grants FIBF is. That's the kind of stuff we were looking for. And we found there's a lot of options out there. More this year than there were last year, I would say. The things we're looking for or that we've asked the information and now it's sort of able to be shown in our catalog. It talks a lot about, how does this align to the grant standard? Here's a link to the demo. We always have to talk about the contract details of the size because we often get questions from the contracting officers of what's this UEI and what level are they or what, are they small, women, disadvantaged, etc. We always put the POC names and emails because although we are trying to shrink the amount of time folks spend sort of doing Google searches or doing their RFIs, we want to shrink that time, give them these results, and have them very quickly go right into talking to the vendors. We see a lot of value. It's an absolute best practice. The PIL Procurement Innovation Lab at DHS, it is something they regularly talk about. You got to talk to the vendors, understand what their questions are so you can write a better RFP, which we're trying to help them do too. So we always make sure they know how to contact the vendors, understand what the contracts are. We find most of these are almost always on multiple award schedules. It allows them to get that best in class GWAC credit. We share the customers, because that's important. It sort of shows past performance, and you can talk to existing customers too. These on the other side are things we've actually added because really specifically, we know about it from our pilot, right? So available languages, Inter-American Fund needed a lot of different languages. Why not me ask that question once instead of everyone having to ask you as vendors, you have to constantly be sending those emails back. Number of years in the federal grants space. That's important because quite frankly, we got to give credit to, ERA and Grant Solutions that's been around for many, many years, 20 plus years. Some of these and the others, they've only been around for 1 year. That's okay. They're innovative if they can meet and do the needs, but you got to give credit where people have been doing this for a lot. You got to realize they've learned a lot too. So we did gather that. That was actually feedback. Again, actually a private vendor told us that, hey, you should really ask this question. We capture a lot about FedRAMP. I am not the FedRAMP PMO. I am not requiring FedRAMP. I can just tell you that the CIOs always have this question. Which ones are FedRAMPs? And it's a very confusing question to answer because FedRAMPs can be defined in, I feel like, 1,000 different ways. So we've broken it down by infrastructure, platform, software. Most importantly, we capture the ID so that the whole point of FedRAMP is that you don't have to go and do your own security paperwork. So if you have the ID, you can go to their website and pull that paperwork. Again, FedRAMP's value, it gives you buying confidence, you're buying a secure solution, but also when you go to get your ATO, it's drastically faster. And remember when I said most of these buying agencies don't even have a CIO. So they want something that they can just trust someone else. And that's why we really capture that. I am very curious, since we may have vendors on the line, to see if you have any feedback on the aspects that we capture in our catalog. If you think we're missing anything, this has not been published yet, partly because we are still gathering feedback. We just gathered feedback last week from all of our 51 awarding agencies. Vendors have already given me the feedback. That's why a lot of changes came. But is there anything else any of you on the line think that we're missing that we really should also add in? All right, then I'm going to keep going because I want to give time if there are any other questions.
Actually,
yes.
hi, sorry about that. My name is Sandra Abbott. I'm with Forest Technology Solutions. I spent 36 years in the federal government, 25 years at HRSA. So, was actually instrumental in helping to build the EHBs, which is one of the systems, and was involved actually in grant solutions as well as grants.gov a long time ago. One of the things I think that's important is understanding, and I know it says number of years in federal grants, but there's all different aspects of that, right? And so there's the aspect of building a system, and that's extremely important. There's also the aspect of understanding the difference in the grants. There are some grants, for example, I'm just going to give an example on one agency where the grantee applies to the state then sends that application through to the agency then looks at how much the state has given and then, or has been allocated, and then will approve or not approve. So there's different workflows. And it's really important to have an understanding of what those workflows are, because some of these more unique workflows, like where the state and the applicants are working and they're working in tandem to get the funding from the federal agency, who then has to see how much is obligated per state. That's a very different model than, let's say, I don't know, I'm just going to use ERA because I'm familiar with it, where you have the grantee applying into the either using grants.gov or having their own application portal where the review system and everything is taking place there. So I think it's not only a question of number of years in federal grants experience, but also understanding the different operational aspects of the grants. And that's and if whoever the vendor is doesn't understand that, they may find, that they may, for example, the agency may choose a particular solution that's not really right for that agency because of the different workflows involved. And so I think that's really important to take account of. And the other thing is, I know QSMO is extremely important and welcome it. I think it's the other possibility too, though, is, you've got organizations or companies like Horace Technology Solutions, which does a lot of specializes in grant systems. And, for example, some of them are similar to the NIH grants. How great would it be if QSMO was able to say to the large businesses, hey, you know what? You've got this organization that does medical research grants, and it's an 8A small business, which everyone's trying to support. Guys, you should talk to each other. You can't, I know legally you can't make anybody do anything, right? Mm-hmm. But you could at least say, hey, maybe it's worth it, because if you can do that and the two organizations start to work together, then maybe the organization that Horace is supporting that is doing medical research grants using a different system, perhaps would be more willing to work and say, let's collaborate, let's integrate with ERA. So, you know, those are kinds of a couple of ideas. And I'm happy to discuss further if you're interested.
Thank you. So let's see, a few things. One, to your point of, you know, different systems or different programs usually need different, can very easily need different processes or even levels of review. That is one thing I don't think I captured in my catalog, because let me tell you, there's a whole bunch of different programs out there, 1,500 plus
Right.
every day. But what we do, that's why we say agencies take the time to talk to the vendors and tell them what makes you special. We actually, I haven't even shown you this, but we have something we call our procurement checklist. And we actually tell them, hey, when you're writing an RFP, make sure you list all these things out. And then we even, from the vendors who responded to our RFI, we said, hey, what's really important things that you need to know to appropriately bid and price. And a lot of them gave us like specifics. These are the specific things that usually are different based on the buying agency. So we have that. We sort of pulled all those questions together and we said, you know, there needs to be a section. We have a template that they could just use to write their RFP and then insert this section of like agency specific needs. And those are all the questions they specifically need to answer. Like the one you just said, the review process and how they submit their application. So that's how we deal with that, or not deal with it, but try to reflect those very unique and legitimate unique differences. To your point about engaging with small business. So one, I will say our evaluation criteria, the sample evaluation criteria we have, it always includes an evaluation criteria of small business engagement. Additionally, if the agency says, I actually need to go straight to small business, well, then we have that information reflected in our catalog. But a piece that I heard you say that I think is something we've thought about is like a matchmaking event. We've heard of other parts of HHS. They actually sit right down the hall who've had success of that. So that's on the back of our mind. So thank you for bringing it up, because it sounds like that could be really helpful. Folks are asking, many agencies combine grants with other processes. That is very true. That is a tricky part for us at the Grants QSMO. We are the QSMO for grants. We are not the QSMO for financial assistance, and it makes it really hard. We are very aware of all the other different loans, indemnity agreements, etc., direct payments. We are not tracking all those different types, but that is definitely a question that agencies can ask. You're asking, can we share the procurement checklist? To strengthen it. That's a really good question. I'm trying to think. We don't have it currently. It's not currently finalized, which is why I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can share that. And I have to check. We're meeting next week or on the 21st with GSA on it. So that's why we definitely can't share it today, but in the future, I hear the feedback. That could be really interesting. Maybe we could come back to ACT-IAC and get some feedback. Mary Beth, you came off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted, going back to Sandra's comments and suggestions, I under the current customers, kind of in terms of understanding what they have, what types of work they've already done, maybe we're also asking for the whether it's a federal agency or a state or like a local recipient organization that the vendor may have supported, if we also specifically ask the types of grants that they supported. Because to your point, Sandra, competitive process versus non-competitive process results in very different workflows. And even within the competitive space, again, just grants and cooperative agreements, we know there were some agencies who had funding under CARES Act or subsequent appropriations that basically was one-time recipients applicants who've never applied before, and they basically just needed to fill out an eligibility document, and then they were going to get the money. So different process, different workflows that can also help inform the people who come to try to ingest the information later.
Yeah,
I think, good feedback. Thank you, Sandra.
I like that. We did ask, another piece was volume going through your system, volume of grants. We did ask that of the vendors. I have to tell you, it was all over the board, really hard to check it. I couldn't really validate it. So actually we decided not to put that information in there because we are very serious about data integrity at the Grants QSMO. It means something. We want it to mean something if we share the information and that you can trust it. But good point. We could definitely ask about sort of types of grants that are going through the systems in the future. Let's go to the next slide. So this information, we are launching it. It is live now. That link is there. If you are able, if you're a government employee, you can sign in and see more information that would be available in a little screenshot there, the resources and templates. But what we're doing, we're going to continue to iterate on this in the next 3 weeks to add more and more stuff. So one thing we'll be adding is that catalog of market research. Another thing, Tom, is the procurement checklist. Once that's finalized, that would go up there. We are just moving as fast as we can to try to get everything up. But the first thing we've been working really hard that we've prioritized, we're going to be adding a button that's called Buying Insights, Federal Marketplace Buying Insights. Why we're doing that is our survey, customer satisfaction survey we got of the Grants QSMO said our lowest mark was in pricing transparency of our federal marketplace. So what we've done, and I'm very proud of our federal partners, are the ones that are on our marketplace, for really working with me and being willing to be transparent. We've created, it's an Excel spreadsheet, but it explains more about how they are building their cost. Where's their cost methodology come from? Some are able to get, $116 per open document. Kudos to them. That's like top, A+ cost methodology and shared services. Others, understandably, it's priced by module because that's how they sell it. They sell it by module, and each module has a different sort of volume factor. So we were able to at least get all the providers to give us information on their cost methodology. How do you pay for it? When does the estimate come in every year? Their IT sort of dashboard, giving them their sort of the ratings that they get from their CIOs each year, the volume, again, very similar to what's in the commercial space, number of years in grants experience, the volume going through, the languages they have, the standard interfaces. So you could a little bit compare apples to apples, but again, huge kudos to them. It now includes cost methodology. That was a huge feedback point we were getting from our customers, the ones that are currently using federal shared services. It's not all the way there. You are not gonna if you're a federal agency, you're not gonna go there and always see it's $20 per program, for instance. Some you will, but others you won't. But we're gonna keep working at it. And this is a huge step in the right direction. So I'm super excited about it. Mike Peckham, we are working on the data standards. That's great. Curious if you're setting architectural standards. Okay, so that is true that the legacy systems are definitely struggling with the approach. I would say, well, I don't know, Mary Beth, I may turn it to Mary Beth because she is definitely more involved in the data standards work.
So great question, Mike, and for the benefit of anybody who can't see the chat, Mike Peckham's question was, will we be setting architectural standards to ensure systems become fully interoperable? Some of the legacy systems are still struggling with this approach. So under the requirements of the GRADE Act, OMB and HHS as the co-leads for GRADE Act implementation and as basically setting grants data standards, are working on creating and releasing implementation guidance that would direct stakeholders what to do about data standards. The role the Grants QSMO plays in that is getting at what your question is, which is how do we help drive the adoption of the data standards and put certain requirements in place. So what we may not, I would say, initially get to what your question is driving at, architectural standards to ensure interoperability. That is certainly like a foundational goal, like I mentioned earlier, like just what we in general push for, how we advise agencies when they're working with the vendors and putting those requirements in. I think a lot of the legacy systems, there may not be an immediate requirement. This is a pre-decisional point, subject to the official release of implementation guidance about the GREAT Act and the data standards. But we may not require legacy systems to have to incorporate the data standards until they start going through some sort of modernization initiative, where they're trying to infuse additional money. Because, like we all know, with all of these government-wide initiatives, they don't come with money to support the agencies in fulfilling these requirements. So we're trying to do justice for all of the stakeholders and minimize burden as much as possible, and be cognizant of the fact that it might make the most sense to catch these investments, or catch the legacy systems, the agency-owned systems, as they're going through a process and they're already in a position to be asking for funds, and we can put these requirements in there. But that's certainly something we're driving towards.
The only other thing I would add, as far as it's not specific data standards and data specifications, but as far as sort of architectural standards, without a doubt, the solution needs to meet the US web design standards that the government GSA sets out. It needs to be 508 compliant. It needs to be, almost all of our award management systems require FSMA moderate, FedRAMP moderate. Again, they got to meet the NIST controls to be able to get an ATO. So those are definitely set. And we do have sort of expected standard interfaces that you need to be able to build. So at least that piece is there, but there's the others, very specific sort of technical specs. Okay, I know we are at time. I'm so sorry. The last slide, which you will be sent, is how you can connect with us. One more slide, if you don't mind, Dan York, is how you can join our listserv. We put out a lot of information through our newsletter, just different trainings when we want to highlight those. If you are a federal provider or anyone who has a training that you think would be very valuable, it's free. We don't really want to prioritize non-free, but if you have a free one, we're happy that relates to grants. We're happy to publicize it via our listserv. It's a very large listserv at this point, so please do sign up and share if you have anything you would like us to share. Check out our marketplace website, our acquisition gateway, especially if you're a federal agency. If you are a federal agency who needs to buy something, come to us. Mary Beth and I can help you. We promise 30 minutes with us will save you hours of time. That's my new tagline. And I think you'll get a good product in the end. All right, back to you, Varsha.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a great discussion, and I wish we had more time. I'm sure we all learned quite a bit today. Mary Beth and Andrea, we really appreciate the work you all are doing, and also everyone on this call, who are part of this bigger, broader community. So definitely it was great to hear a lot of great improvements that you guys are working on. And we're all very excited to be part of this journey together. I know we're over time now. So the last slide that you shared and the entire deck, we will share it with the entire community who attended this call, and folks who were not able to attend this call, they can go in and check the material. With that, thank you both for taking the time today and sharing the knowledge with all of us. Back to you, Dan.
Great. Well, that's a wrap, as we like to say. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.